then go to the final public speaker, Roxanne DeBow, who I recall is from the Cambridge Cycling Campaign from her past appearances.
Hello again. I hope you don't mind, I've just added another paragraph to the end of our question because we've had lots more discussion yesterday at our monthly meeting. Nothing too shocking. I'll start with Histon Road. On behalf of the cycling campaign, I'd like to state that we welcome proposals to improve cycling along Histon Road, crucially separating people on bikes from motor traffic and from pedestrians. However, the limited space on Histon Road means this cannot be an option along the full length. So the first question, what additional studies would be undertaken to explore options for ways to reduce through traffic along these roads such that bus lanes would not be required whilst still allowing reliable bus journeys, reduced air pollution and safer walking and cycling routes? Milton Road. So the proposal for Milton Road has started with the narrow focus of improving bus services without trying to understand and solve the root causes of the congestion problems in Cambridge. As such, it is mostly an assumption that the best solution for moving the most number of people with the fastest, most reliable journey times and in the most sustainable way is achieved by buses with bus lanes. We think this is a rash approach and that more should be done to reduce the overall level of traffic so that all transportation options, including cycling and walking, can be safe and viable options. The current proposals are just bus lanes with cycling provision tacked on. Only the do maximum option in this proposal can provide suitable infrastructure for those who wish to cycle and walk. While we welcome this proposal, we do have strong concerns that this cannot be implemented, and should this be the case, we fear that the cycling and walking provisions will be the first to be compromised. Details of the proposal options indicate how quickly this scheme has been put together, including proposing a design which copies the most dangerous junction for cycling in Cambridge, as recently reported in the national press. We urge the City Deal Assembly to push back on these plans to ensure a more comprehensive proposal can be made. If this cannot be done, we urge the Assembly to strongly encourage the do maximum option and to ensure that in the process the cycling facilities are not compromised. As always, the campaign are here to consult and work with the Council and consultants to ensure the best possible outcomes and infrastructure can be designed. We've gone through these designs and already determined a number of ways they could be improved. Can we have the opportunity to speak with your consultants and give them our advice?
Thank you very much, Roxanne. So a number of points there, Graham. I don't know if you want to have a shot, or perhaps should have taken this along with the report on these two projects. But is it better to hold this in store and come back to them, or do you want to answer them now?
I'm Chairman. If I just take the general thrust of the comments, but then Stuart Walmsley, who's going to introduce the report, obviously can answer from the Assembly members more specific questions about the detail of those papers. But I think there are, from the Speaker, I think there are just a couple of sort of general points that it would probably be helpful to address here, and then the more detailed points can be picked up later if that's okay. So I think, if we take the two as you put them, so Histon Road, I think that, as I say, the key point you're asking is, how can it be further improved? And Histon Road, as Stuart will explain, faces a particular set of constraints in terms of width and so on. So I think the general answer to that is we've talked about it a couple of times already this afternoon. There is the call for evidence and the sort of general process that we're looking at to get ideas on how we can manage the overall levels of traffic within Cambridge City. So that's one level, because you talk about needing to reduce the overall movement. And so, as I said, in relation to Mr. Lee's questions, we've always, and just to confirm what the Chairman said, we've always, as officers, been very clear that it has to be a two-pronged approach of both better alternatives, but also some measures to manage traffic demand. So there's that, and then also in terms of more specific measures, we've got the Cambridge Access Study, which is looking at a whole range of things, and we'll continue to look at a whole range of things across Cambridge City, so smaller type schemes that could be implemented to improve movement and flow, but particularly for cyclists, pedestrians and bus users rather than for the car. So I think that covers off the Histon Road, and sort of strays into the Milton Road point, because again the issue about the call for evidence and managing traffic is very much evident, if you like, in your question on Milton Road. I think just the other thing I would say very generally is that, and clearly you represent the cycling campaign, and therefore you come at this from a particular angle. Obviously, as officers, what we've got to do is to produce schemes that balance up the needs of all users, and that does include car drivers as well as cyclists, pedestrians, and bus users. And so, what we're trying to put forward is something that, if you like, makes for the vulnerable users those roads, or could make those roads much safer, but at the same time does allow for those other modes of transport. And I think when we look at cycling specifically, bear in mind these are key radial routes that are serving not just Cambridge City but South Cambridgeshire and beyond. There are very, very significant numbers of people using these corridors that actually cycling is not a viable option for them, and so we need to provide for those people as well, hence the improved bus facilities, but we do need to make sure that alongside that we improve facilities for cyclists as well. So that's the challenge that we face, and it is always, in a limited amount of space, it is a challenge, and it is always a bit of a trade-off, but that's what we're trying to achieve. Just as a one final general comment I would make, and I'm sure that Stuart will emphasise this in his introduction. So what the Assembly has before it today are very, very much indicative options for potential solutions on both Milton Road and Histon Road. So we're following exactly the same format that we did with the A4 to 8, which is putting out some, if you like, a range of potential options on which we will undertake consultation towards the end of this year. We expect a whole range of views to come back, not only on those specific principles, but also, hybrid options or different options. We will take all of those into account and then make the recommendations based upon that back to the Assembly and the Board. So we're not saying these are the only two options. They're sort of two ends of a spectrum almost, that we're saying, but here are different types of option. Give us your views on those, and then we can develop something much more detailed around that. So, the comments you've made today would be really helpful to feed into that process. But, as I said at the start, we will have to judge that against the bus users, the pedestrians, the car drivers, and others, to make sure that we get a reasonable balance in the final recommendation that goes forward.
Thanks, Graham. My reaction to your points were that, in fact, these are exactly the sort of points that are applicable to the consultation that the board may go on to decide on. But I think they do inform our discussion when we have this in just a moment. Anyone else want to? Bridget?
I suppose that you brought up an interesting point about consultation, at what point it happens. So what she's actually asking is for the opportunity to be involved as a consultee early on in the process rather than later in the process. And I do wonder whether we should just be dismissing that, because there is obviously an optimum time for ideas to be fed into these projects being worked up that actually might save time and money and effort if you capitalise on that optimum time, and that might be early on in the process rather than once schemes have been worked up and the consultation being reflective rather than proactive. So it's a slightly different way of thinking of things, and I wonder whether we should be just dismissing it or actually saying, okay, you've asked to speak to the chaps, the people working up this scheme now. Why not? If it's an hour of their time to actually listen to what she has to say now, why don't we do that?
The first thing is that I don't think anyone's considering dismissing the points that have been made. So I think that's not really in the range of what I think we're going to be saying here. My understanding is that this is the first and very conceptual stage, the first of 3 levels of consultation about this, and there has already been a stakeholder discussion, which I think organisations such as the Cycling Campaign have participated in. But I also believe and know that the officers do make themselves available for discussions of the kind that you might be looking for anyway, more or less at any time. But Graham, could you verify or disagree with any of that?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I absolutely agree with that, and just to confirm your point that in both these instances, Councillor Smith's point, there were stakeholder discussions. They did include the cycling campaigns. We've done exactly what you suggested. Having said all of that, clearly and rightly, the cycling campaign come with a particular perspective, as do other stakeholders. We have to balance all of those out. So just because we have those discussions, it doesn't necessarily mean we will reflect exactly what any one of those stakeholders has told us, because that would be an impossible thing to do, because different stakeholders have different objectives. You know, we talk to the bus company, and what they want is nice, big, wide, uninterrupted bus lanes without cyclists in them. So we have to manage all of that. But, you know, I can assure the Assembly that those discussions have taken place. The Chairman's quite right that officers are always available, and we have a very good dialogue with the cycling campaign and others. As the Chairman said, this is very much the point of this whole process, that we're putting some ideas out there, but we want to have a full dialogue with the full range of stakeholders, so we can make the best possible recommendation when it comes back to the Assembly and to the Board.
Thanks. Dave?
Chair, thanks. I'm just thinking out loud, really. Is there any provision that on certain occasions that interest groups that have such a following could not take part in debates within this committee?
Well, I mean, the membership of the Assembly is something that we have been given, effectively. So I'm not sure that we're in a position to change that. The provision that's made to be kind of open to other contributions is exactly this sort of public statement, public question process. Whether there is a need to change the format of that is also not strictly within our control, but it may be that it's something we could consider in the course of time. But I think that there is a potential problem of, even if we wanted to change the constitution of the Assembly, that there are many groups who would like to contribute, and if we simply extended our membership to each one of them, I think we'd be an extremely large body and rather unwieldy. But I mean, that may be a future discussion. I think my own perception is that on the cycling related, on all schemes with a cycling component, the cycling campaign is regarded as a leading stakeholder, and that their views are actively sought, if not in our meetings, by officers who will bring their point of view to us. But does anyone else? Dave, do you want to come back on that?
No, I was just opening it up at this stage, and maybe we might want to think about it. I'm not making an actual proposal, but just something we may want to think about.
Well, perhaps there's a time when we should think about, you know, with a few months of experience of things like that, whether we would like to seek changes. But I think probably starting to do that right now might not be the right thing. Any other points? I'm afraid I can't. And that's maybe a point that we could come back to, whether we should be able to. But thank you very much, Roxanne. And we'll take account of the points in the debate we now have. So, we are going to deal now with the reports, which are all under item 6. In consultation with officers, I've agreed that we will take their reports 6A and 6B together, and that we will have one debate about both of them to avoid what would be a certain level of repetition, because there are certain key similarities. And I've asked them to make sure that they do highlight to us the differences where there are different issues. So I don't know who's introducing. Stuart.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, we are taking these two reports together. Just so I can introduce you to Brian Stinton as well. Brian is supporting me on this item, and that he is actually leading the team of people in this particular project and commissioning the consultants. So any specific detailed questions, he's here to give some assistance. I thought, so we could wrap that up in this meeting. So in terms of the item itself, this is a pretty well-established corridor route, which members here will be, I'm sure, familiar with, probably much more than I am, and the history that goes with it. The idea is that this gives us a better opportunity to revisit what was perhaps done in the past. We've certainly got some good advice, and we're looking to sort of develop some ideas around how we can develop this scheme. It's a fairly long section of corridor. It currently sits well within the long-term transport strategy. It is within our forward works and local transport plans. So it is a well-defined project. So we're not doing something here that hasn't been around for some time, which is important to suggest. We know that this section, both sections of the Milton and Histon, suffer from congestion during peak times. We know that the bus journey reliability times aren't good. We know that there are some delays at some of the bus stops, particularly at certain sections of that route. We also know that there are problems at the existing junctions. In particular, we talk about the Elizabeth Way roundabout, and that is included within the study too. And we've got the opportunity now to look at this and to sort of think of it in a broader sense, and that is to do a quite radical approach and to do some maximum changes to deliver what we would like to do here. Clearly there are going to be some implications of doing that around the overall public realm, the actual amount of space and highway that we've got available. Histon and Milton are very different, particularly as we get closer to the town centre. It's already been mentioned here today, the width and the geometry changes quite dramatically, which does restrict some of the aspects of the work that we can do. But nevertheless, we feel confident that we can come up with some form of options here that will provide, in essence, the best mix of available solutions for cycling, for buses, for transport, and for other modes of transport. And we're also looking as well, given the city deal approach and the way that we're taking these schemes forward, is to think about innovation. How can we improve the technical advances that we can introduce at some of these junctions? How can we give some real-time information and technology built into some of these systems? So we're looking at a whole range of things here, and the way that the scheme has been funded, it gives us the opportunity to do that along its entire length. So we're looking at a range of things here which I think will come up with something which is pretty dramatic, but in some ways deliverable. It falls in line with the overall approach that we need to do the maximum efficiency of the network, so we improve the overall delivery of it. Now that means that we've got some issues down there, as you know, with some public realm issues. There are some trees down there that we have to look at. There are some grass verges. There are some areas where we, particularly on the Histon Road section, where we don't have enough highway, so we may need to think about some elements of that. So this is all to be considered as we go forward with the consultation. And we're looking at this stage to get a conceptual view on what is achievable, what's acceptable, and what we can, in essence, deliver along this particular corridor, both corridors. The consultation is planned to start this year. We will be sending out consultation literature in December, and we will be holding some exhibitions in January to look at some of the ways forward on this. And the intention is that we will bring something back to the Assembly in the new year, hopefully with some clearer idea of what the solutions are available to us. As I said, we can take some questions around the schemes themselves if you've got them, but in essence, that's at the moment where we are. It's a conceptual idea. We're trying to stimulate debate. We've been here before, but we're looking for new ideas, new solutions, and to come up with some suggestions in the best way that we can deliver this scheme.
Thanks very much, Stuart. We'll now go and invite contributions from Assembly members to this, but I just want to draw everyone's attention to the fact that we've got a series of recommendations at the end of this, and the key real thrust of that is this okay to put out to consultation? This is not the decision. So I think that we obviously need to understand what it is that we're answering that question on, and comments are really helpful, I guess, to officers in a way that they might shape the way the consultation is carried out. Sir Michael.
We're very happy, obviously, that we're all consulted and you put your proposals forward. But and I applaud the recommendations of the cycling lobby and all the rest. I would just like to make a case for those who live sort of 10 miles away from Cambridge who need to get in can't bicycle that way and have to go to various points in Cambridge. They do need to get in by car. I do want to make a case for the car lobby as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Claire?
Can I propose a change to the recommendation? So we have recommendation the Executive Board is recommended to A, note the findings, B, approve public consultation. Can I add something to the end of that sentence which just makes clear one of the questions that we're frequently asked? And I would put in the words, as shown on the accompanying plans, and encourage all other ideas to be properly considered. Because I think we don't make it clear often enough that all other ideas are welcome.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you for that. We'll store that up and come back to it at the time of voting, and any other comments on it, welcome. The next I have is Kevin, and then Helen.
Yes,
Francis.
thank you, Chair. I mean, it's partly, I suppose, in slight disagreement with the Cambridge cycling campaign about the need for buses. I think buses are actually going to become slightly more central because as Cambridge becomes less and less affordable for many, many people, and we're pushing people to live further and further out, as Sir Michael has already commented on. I think that we are going to need park and ride, but certainly great ease of bus flow into Cambridge, because the people that are coming in from outside, they're not fortunate enough to live in the city, but they are serving and cleaning and doing all the rest of it for everybody that is fortunate enough to live here. And I think we should be making it as easy as possible for them to get here.
Thank you. Helen?
My question was around the costs in paragraphs 20 and 21, where I think it suggests that these proposals may well exceed the indicative allocations, and then I think in paragraph 21 it's kind of hinted that there might be some additional funds available, but it's really around, I guess, the danger of setting up a consultation that comes down in favour of a particular proposal that might then be completely unaffordable, and how we're going to handle that as part of the kind of consultation process.
Thank you. Francis?
4 questions, but they're short ones, if I may. Firstly, could you just tell me who WSP Parsons Brinckerhoff are? It's a really, really good fact document, which I'm afraid I haven't really been able to digest because I only got it recently. But just 2 seconds on who they are. And the reason for my question is just to reassure us all that effectively, they're the best people one could have possibly chosen, and therefore we can take the document sort of very seriously. Secondly, if you could then help me with the level of engagement between WSP Parsons Brinckerhoff and officers. In other words, that this is not just dumped on us from on high by WSP Parsons Brinckerhoff, but there's been a really good level of engagement and a continuing level of engagement. Thirdly, and I'm now moving to the public consultation itself, the one thing I felt missing from this was the sort of question about where everyone's going. There's a lot of sort of going along Milton Road and going down the Histon Road, but where are they actually trying to get to at the end of the journey? Are they going to the historic centre? Are they going round? Where are they trying to get to? And if there was any way that there could be just a small amount of research on and publication, perhaps even in the consultation, on where they're trying to get to, I would find that very helpful. And finally, I've learned extensively from the A428 consultation that a lot of people that cry out for clarity on dates. If there is any way at a really early stage to say, which date in December will it be launched? I've heard in December, I've heard mid-December. It's astonishing how members of the public really love to know which exact date it will be launched. And then I heard that this is coming back to the board, in the new year, or I think the resolution is in the spring. And if we could get early clarity on which meeting, I think members of the public find that really useful, because then they can just pop them in their diaries and hold off till then. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I've got two more speakers, and then I'm going to go to the officers for some responses on those points. The next is Morris, and the one after that is Bridget.
Thank you, Chairman. Perhaps firstly I should declare an interest as a former councillor for West Chesterton, through which can't look into the Milton Road proposal goes. But before saying more, perhaps we need to remind ourselves that an essential part of our purpose in being here is to increase the capacity for getting people into and around Cambridge. We have been here before, and we really must do something about these routes to increase the number of people that can go along them. And I don't disagree with what Kevin was saying, but it's not a matter of either cycles or buses. It's that we need to increase the capacity and the pleasure in travelling on both those modes. Now, the biggest bone of contention in West Chesterton, as far as this goes, is the loss of the trees. And we can all fully understand why it is such a regret that may be happening, and appreciate the value that having trees in the urban environment can contribute. I'm also aware that there are many innovative solutions to providing vegetation on roads that are being introduced more recently, rather than merely saying we've either got to preserve the trees that are there at the moment, or we've got to do without trees altogether and have just a continuous concrete expanse between the front of one house and the one on the opposite side of the road. And I wonder, taking up the invitation from the previous meeting to have further items on our agenda, whether we could perhaps hear from a landscape consultant as to what some of these innovative ideas are, so that we could get an idea of whether it is possible to have something, some vegetation, trees in some form, along Milton Road, although it's unlikely that we'll be able to deliver schemes such as these by preserving the ones that are there at the moment, or certainly all of them.
Thank you. Thank you. We'll store that point up till the end when we vote on recommendations, I think.
Thank you. This is almost a duplication of what Maurice has just said. It's not going to be hard to predict the level of public outcry there's going to be at the considerable number of highway trees that are going to be removed. People will get very, very emotionally aerated about it. So again, just to support what Maurice has said, it would be very good if at the outset we could be putting forward some innovative mitigation for the loss of those trees, so that we're not just telling people we're going to be chopping down all these trees, which you love dearly, but we're going to be chopping them down, but we're going to be offering you something different, something just as good. It'd be lovely if it was even something better. But do that at the outset. Don't be reactive about it. Let's be proactive about it.
Okay, thank you. I'm now going to go to... I'm not cutting off the debate, so there was going to be another tranche now. I just needed to keep it manageable from the officer's point of view, I think. Graham or Stuart, Brian, I'm not sure which of you is going to I'll work through those points.
Okay, I'll work through this. In terms of costs, I mean, all options are going to be costly. We're in a fairly urban environment. There are going to be many cables and apparatus that are going to be that exist below the road and below the footways, which will need moving, lowering, or whatever. They're expensive, and I think in a way we're building in that sort of risk element to the project, and I think we'll face that almost in all options. So we've got to recognise that there is a huge cost involved in just that simple operation. There's also going to be a cost to consider around the technology we put into the signals and the cabling and everything else that goes with that, and linking it up into some sort of integrated system that we can command from different points. Again, it's expensive and we've got to work with it. We've got some ideas around how we can build some infrastructure to segregate and to make things work. It's going to be unusual and it might be expensive. So we've just identified that these innovations do come at a cost, but they are worthwhile. And maybe that can pick that up with the way that we deal with the innovation side of things, is that we're not out to remove or to reduce the stock of trees. We're not trying to damage the overall street scene. We're trying to improve it. And there are examples where this can be done. And what we're trying to do is to see where the best examples are. And there are examples in London, believe it or not, where these sorts of things are done, and very successfully as well. So I don't think it's a showstopper. I think it's an opportunity that we can think about it and we can come up with some ideas and solutions. So that's what we're doing as part of the study. And that leads...
Before you go on
Yeah.
to the next point,
Yeah.
I mean, I think what Helen's question was, if I really understood it, was not what might cause the cost variability, but were we in danger of putting out to consultation some things that we might not be able to afford the delivery of? How can we be sure of that, or is there sufficient margin in our funding overall to encompass what might be found?
I mean, there is provisions within the costs for what we consider to be contingencies, extra that we are aware of. We've got to be realistic. There are going to be some costs. We know with some certainty what exists below the ground. We've got some idea of what's going to be involved, but there is going to be a discussion that goes behind it. So it isn't going to stop the show. It just means we may have to do things slightly different. For instance, hit something which is completely unforeseen, and you have to take some alternative measures. So it's how these things are done. When you work in an environment like we do, you have to expect that you'll come up against things. They're not showstoppers, they just mean you have to do it. Sorry, is that better? So in essence, that it's a very important point. It's one that we're conscious of all the time, and as we evolve with this scheme, it's going to be more and more an issue for us as we get more intelligence about exactly what the scheme is going to look like. But again, as I said, it's not a showstopper. It's a much more question of how we do it. We've done it elsewhere. I've certainly worked on projects where we've done it without any difficulties. I won't dwell anymore if that's okay. In terms of, if I could pick up Councillor Burkett's point, in terms of the best people, we think we've got the best people. We've done a lot of research. Brian's done some fairly detailed studies in trying to procure a range of consultants that we've got available to us. WSP, Price and Burkhoff are one of the best ones. They work across the country. They've been involved in many projects in London. So there's no question in my mind that we've got the right people. We've got other consultants involved in the city centre, which is McDonald's, again an international company working on some very, very big projects. And to reassure you, if I can, one of the things that strikes me with City Deal is that it is attracting more interest. And by implication, that means we're getting more skills and we're getting better provisions around consultancies, services. We need that support to make this project work, so we've got a number of good opportunities there. In terms of the consultation, you're right, okay, I did brush across here. Mid-December 15th, around that time we'll get out the consultation literature. Consultation that the exhibitions will be in the middle of January. It has to be 2 weeks after the sort of return time, so maybe again around between the 15th and 16th. And we're coming back to the board in March. It might be, we will need to be cautious a little bit about that time, because what strikes me is that we are beginning to sort of build in a lot of expectations around the return dates. And we have got, it's June, I'm sorry, I apologise. It was originally March on the programme, but we did change it on discussions to June. And I think that gives us more flexibility and more time, so my apologies on that. In terms of landscaping, yes, we're dealing, I mean, the city, Cambridge City Council are part of the group, the stakeholder group that we have, and we're using their skills and advantages around what we can do in terms of public realm. We've mentioned in the report of Milton Road how we're going to try to improve Mitcham's Corner, and clearly that project is going to rely heavily upon the scope and the skills of the Cambridge City Council teams to help us come up and shape that particular project. So they're all part of the process, and they form a very valuable partner in this process.
A couple of points that Councillor Burkett raised as well about the engagement with WSP. It's an iterative process. I suppose just on the appointment of WSP to start with, we put out a brief nationally to consultants, and WSP are a well-known highway industry consultant.
we put out a brief describing the sort of work that we required to anybody that cared to bid within a framework contract. We had a number of bids back. They were assessed both on quality and price, with quality being given something of an emphasis on this particular project, and they were appointed through that process. In working on the brief, they've engaged with us fully in that we told them what we wanted. They've come back with draft proposals, draft ideas. We've worked collaboratively with them to ensure that they're capturing our objectives within the scheme. So I think that's a particularly important thing. Just a bit on the consultation, encapsulating information on where people are going along Milton Road. Work is underway on traffic modelling. I think it's noticeable in the report that the traffic modelling is not yet completed. There are a number of reasons for that, including vandalism of some of the equipment that was put up earlier in the year, and because we're working to a tight timescale, we couldn't get it completed by this meeting. But that will start to identify the origin and destination of journeys along Milton Road, or Milton and Histon Road, sorry.
Thank you. I then have a second batch, but I have only one name at the moment, Noel.
Oh, actually, this is a follow-through from what Mr. Walmsley alluded to. It's Mitcham's Corner. I'm very pleased to see that it's highlighted in the report here. But I'd like to put forward a plea that Mitcham's Corner is actually put quite high up when it comes to debating the allocation of funds, because when you look at the condition of Mitcham's Corner now, and you keep in mind the plans we have for improving Milton Road, and hopefully they will be very successful in speeding up the buses and making cycling much more pleasant and attractive to people, particularly people who are not cycling at the moment. Anyone who uses Mitcham's Corner at the moment will realise just what a hazardous experience it is. So I'd like to emphasise that if Mitcham's Corner isn't, how to say, sorted out, in many ways, what you do to Milton Road is not really going to have a great amount of benefit for Cambridge, is it? Because you can have the buses speeding down and then they'll hit this awful gyratory route. So when it comes to the discussions about the funds, and the funds are going down rapidly, I would just like to put forward that Mitcham's Corner should be high up on the priority list, even if it is at the sake of putting money aside for replanting trees. Thanks.
Thanks very much. I prop in a couple of questions that I had in this batch. The first of which was referring to the maps in the report. In relation to Histon Road, the Histon Road case is different in terms of buses from Milton Road, in the sense that there is a park and ride facility applying to Milton Road, but there isn't in relation to Histon Road. Should we be worried about that? Does that impair the purpose of our scheme, the fact that we don't have a park and ride on one end of that road? And then the map also shows a dotted line, the development link to Madingley Road Park and Ride. Is it the case that that is a bus only link? And what was the purpose of showing that on the plan? What was the relevance of that to the Histon Road project we're talking about now? That was one question. The next one was on pages 18 and 32, where you created some nice tables which talk about the sort of things that can be expected from the two options. I must admit, I'm struggling with the terminology around the cycling provision. There is, as I read, there is a difference between advisory, segregated, and mandatory. And I'm guessing that if I'm asking that question and that finds its way into some consultation, lots of people will be asking that question as well, and perhaps you could help us with that now and think about it for the consultation. And the third point I had was In the consultants' material that we accessed through the link, the reference is routinely made to bus priorities. And I think that when we defined this project, we specifically discussed and specified that it was about bus and cycling priorities. And although the consultants' work may predate the way we defined it, it probably is something that needs putting right, because I think it would drive solutions that would end up as different if we just pursued it as bus priorities. Anyway, those 3 points to cover. I don't know if anyone else does. Anyone else have any points to raise at this stage? No? Okay. Stuart?
Okay, sorry, just trying to pick up the points. I've scribbled them down and have trouble reading my own handwriting. I think I note the comments from Councillor Kavanagh on Mitcham's Corner. It is a very important issue within the overall project. I suppose the only thing we should point out is that these schemes will be developed much further and subject to a business case which will be measured against the objectives that are agreed. I think probably there's a need to just, which I think is again highlighted in the report, the need to establish the advantages that can be provided within Mitcham's Corner, the Mitcham's Corner area in terms of transport, which could potentially conflict with some of the aspirations that are coming forward from the City Council in terms of the environmental improvements. And that's something that we have to be very cautious of in the way the scheme is developed. And we are working very closely with the City Council landscape architects and designers to try and achieve that balance. The map in the report. The map in the report, I think the dotted line, just to capture it quickly, is showing the potential, the future route that will link Histon Road with Madingley Road through the NIAB development. That obviously has an influence in the future on bus routes and the potential for bus routes to change. That's the West Cambridge University development is what we're referring to. So it has potential for bus routes to change. I think the other thing to be aware of, although there's no direct park and ride site on the Histon corridor, on the Histon Road corridor, it does serve the Cambridge guided busway, so we do have quite a few vehicles coming along the busway and ending up using Histon Road. That is likely to increase, as indeed the same impact will be felt on Milton Road. So I think there is an issue there. To make sure that we do provide some benefits to passenger transport along with everybody else on that corridor. Definitions, interesting, yes. I think engineers are always guilty of using terminology that's simple to themselves but not widely understood to the general public, and I take your point on making sure that they're clearly defined in the consultation. Simply speaking, an advisory cycle lane is what it says. It's shown by a dotted line along the side of the road. Cyclists are advised to use the road space. It doesn't prohibit cars from entering it. It doesn't necessarily keep cars from parking in the lane unless there are specific double yellow lines to do so. A mandatory cycle lane is marked with a continuous white line. It is a mandatory cycle lane. It's illegal for other vehicles to enter that. Again, there are, I think, as one of the questions that was raised earlier, there are some difficulties in the enforcement of parking restrictions. So double yellow lines or single yellow lines, as appropriate, are useful to help enforcement against illegal parking in those areas. A segregated cycle lane is exactly that. It's somehow physically segregated from the main flows of traffic, so cyclists have a completely separate area from motor vehicles. So I think that's something that we'll take away and make sure that we make absolutely clear in the consultation material. Okay.
And then the point about in the consultants work on whether it's bus priorities.
Yes,
bus and cycling priorities
that
really was.
Yeah, I think we need to make sure that the report encapsulates the objectives for all users. Yes, we can do that. I mean, the report is in a draft state at the moment because the modelling outputs will be added to that, so there are opportunities to develop that further.
Thank you. I'm going to Sir Michael.
Just, you said the cycle and bus priorities. I'd say priorities for all. we mustn't be at the expense of something else, because otherwise they'll have to find another way, or go off somewhere else and do the shopping in Newmarket. So be very careful not to hurt Cambridge in what we're doing. We need to cater for all methods of transport. And because people don't come to go to Mitcham's Corner, they go past Mitcham's Corner to go on to somewhere else, probably on the other side of Cambridge. And also, I just caution you on the, I've no sort of knowledge of the particular parking bays you're talking about, but I feel the people who park there, presumably are they local residents, who are they, and is there somewhere else for them to park? Is that a problem? I think it needs to be considered if that is the only place they can park for their house. Thank you.
Thanks very much. I'll just say that it's kind of quite difficult to give everyone the priority, because by definition a priority is giving something that not everyone has, and the priority for sustainable transport methods was part of the ground rules with which we approached the whole city deal. But on the other issues, Graham, would you like to?
Well, sorry, I wish to pick up a few points. I just wanted to clarify that point, because I understand what Sir Michael's saying, but in relation to some of my answers to the earlier questions, the city deal is very much predicated on limiting the amount of car traffic within Cambridge City to appropriate levels, because, again, the point I think I've made very consistently to the Assembly and the Board is that there are too many cars in Cambridge for the amount of space, and that actually degrades the environment for everybody, including the car drivers. So what we do need to do is to encourage, through both restrictions, whatever they may be, as I said in relation to one of the earlier questions, but also better facilities for the alternatives, to encourage less people to use their cars, which means that those who are remaining in their cars will get a better service, if you like, but we will encourage more and more people to use the alternatives. So that isn't priority for all, but it is providing selected priorities that will then hopefully manage in the way that I think Councillor Leake said, because that is absolutely the objective, manage, if you like, our ability to, if you like, improve and increase the through flow of people, but not necessarily of metal boxes, but to actually get more people into Cambridge, but not necessarily by car. So that may seem a subtle difference, but you know, we definitely aren't in the business of providing priority for everybody, including car users. We're selectively providing priority.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm now going to move us to the recommendations and deciding on those here. So we've got a set of recommendations for Histon Road on page 11 and Milton Road on page 23. They aren't completely identical, so we'll have to deal with them separately. We also have the proposition from Claire earlier, which would effectively be an amendment to B in both cases, I think, of the recommendations. When we get to it, I'll ask Graham to read out what he understands that to be. And then we've got the suggestion from Morris in relation to us looking at hearing about what can be done with greening and landscaping in the urban environment. So let's go to the recommendations on page 11 first. Firstly, noting the findings of the assessment and technical study. Is everyone in favour of that? Coming to B then, shall we deal with the amendment first, Graham? Can you tell us what it is?
So the amendment, as I noted it down, is to add the words "and encourage all other ideas to be properly considered" at the end of that sentence.
Okay. Is there a seconder for that? Just to be yes, lots of seconders. Thank you. Do you agree to incorporate that in the recommendation?
Agree.
Okay, so I hear agreement. So supporting the recommendation in total, I imagine that's therefore agreed. Yeah, agreed. Thank you. And agree to receive a report on the consultation in the spring of 2016 on a preferred set of measures.
Agreed.
Thank you very much.
We got June.
Sorry, June is Executive Board, so it'll come to the Assembly before that, probably May, perhaps April.
We're extending school.
Okay, I suppose that's broadly covered by spring, but we're talking of late spring, it sounds like, doesn't it? Okay, thank you. So then the set of recommendations on 23, I'm going to suggest that we assume the incorporation of the amendment and ask you to agree the whole set of recommendations here. Is that agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you. And then we had the suggestion that Maurice made that we consider inviting along on our agenda at a future meeting someone who can highlight for us what can be done in terms of greening and vegetating the urban landscape when you've got schemes like this or like the Madingley Road scheme also, and probably others. Is that something that the board would like to pursue? Anyone against that? So we'll, Vice Chair and Chair will slot that in, I think. It would seem logical to try and do that if we have a meeting in sort of December, January time, so that there is some public awareness of that sort of dimension when this consultation is carried out. Okay, thank you. That's, I think we finished that particular item.